My crazy vegan sister Spartan kicked the BBQ at the church gathering, and I wish I was making this up for views. But I'm currently recording this voice memo in the back of our minivan while my dad screams into the steering wheel. It happened in slow motion like a car crash you can't look away from, because up until 20 minutes ago, it was a perfect Sunday afternoon at Pastor Ricky's house. The sun was shining, the acoustic guitar was playing, and my dad, Nigel, was in his absolute element standing over his pride and joy, a vintage charcoal grill he'd spent all winter restoring. He had 50 burgers sizzling on that grate. He'd been marinating them for 48 hours, and the smell was incredible. It was the kind of smell that brings people together. But apparently, it was also the smell that triggered a sleeper agent in my sister, Valerie. Valerie's only been vegan for 3 weeks, which is fine, honestly. Nobody cared. Mom even made her a separate Tupperware of quinoa salad so she wouldn't feel left out. But Valerie didn't want salad. She wanted a scene. I saw her walking across the lawn first. She was wearing these heavy black combat boots that looked insane with her floral dress, and she had this look in her eyes like a shark that just smelled blood in the water. I thought she was coming over to yell at Dad, or maybe just lecture him about the methane emissions. But she didn't say a single word. She picked up speed, full sprinting across the perfectly mowed grass. Dad didn't even see her coming because he was flipping a patty, and then she launched herself into the air. I'm talking full extension, both feet leaving the ground, like she was an action movie star breaching a door. Her boots connected with the side of the hot metal grill with a sound like a gong, and the entire thing just went airborne. 50 burgers, 5 pounds of burning hot charcoal, and a metal grate. All of it launched sideways in a catastrophic arc of grease and fire. It didn't just hit the ground. It rained down like fiery confetti on the front row of the picnic tables, right where Mrs. Heidi, the pastor's wife, was sitting. Mrs. Heidi was wearing a white lace dress, pristine white. I watched in horror as a half-cooked burger patty slid down her shoulder, leaving a trail of grease, while hot ash dusted her hair like gray snow. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the loudest silence I've ever heard in my life. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed, until Valerie landed in a superhero crouch, stood up, pointed a shaking finger at my dad, and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Meat is murder, and fire cleanses the soul." Dad just stood there, holding his spatula in midair, looking at the overturned grill like he'd just watched his best friend die. And that's when Mrs. Heidi started screaming. We had to evacuate. That is the only word for it. It wasn't a departure, it was an emergency extraction from a hostile war zone, except the war zone was the front lawn of the First Baptist Church, and the enemy combatant was my 23-year-old sister, who was currently vibrating with the adrenaline of 1,000 kale smoothies. Mrs. Heidi's scream was the kind of sound that cuts through your soul. It wasn't a scream of pain exactly, it was a scream of pure, unadulterated shock. She was frantically brushing hot ash off her lace sleeves, smearing grease into the fabric in the process. Pastor Ricky dropped his acoustic guitar. I actually heard the wood crack against the patio pavers and rushed over to her. For about 5 seconds, the entire congregation was frozen. It was like a Renaissance painting of a disaster. You had the choir director holding a potato salad spoon in midair, the youth group leader with his mouth hanging open, and my dad, Nigel, staring at the pile of coals that used to be his burgers. He looked like he was dissociating. I think a part of him actually left his body and ascended to heaven right then and there, leaving behind a shell of a man filled with pure, molten rage. Mom, bless her heart, was the first to break the spell. Daisy is a woman who hates confrontation more than anything on earth. Her survival instinct kicked in, but instead of fight or flight, her response was, apologize and vanish. She grabbed Valerie's arm with a grip strength I didn't know she possessed. Car. Now, Mom hissed. It was the scariest voice I've ever heard her use. Valerie didn't resist. She didn't look ashamed, though. That's the part that really messed with my head. She looked proud. She had her chin up, chest out, breathing hard like she'd just won a marathon. As Mom dragged her past the stunned families, Valerie actually made eye contact with old Mr. Henderson, who was 80 years old and was holding a hot dog, and she shook her head at him in disappointment. The audacity was actually impressive in a twisted way. I grabbed Dad's arm. He was still staring at the grill. Dad, we have to go, I whispered. Dad, the cops. That woke him up. The mention of law enforcement in relation to a church potluck snapped him back to reality. He looked at the ruin of his restoration project, the dented metal, the scattered coals, the wasted beef, and a single tear might have formed in his eye, but he blinked it away instantly. He turned around and marched toward the parking lot with the stiff, robotic movements of a Terminator sent back in time to file an insurance claim. The walk to the minivan was the longest 3 minutes of my life. I could feel the eyes of 50 people drilling into our backs. I could hear the whispers starting up like a hive of bees. Did you see that? Is she on drugs? That poor Nigel. We were instantly the main characters of the town's gossip mill for the next decade. We piled into the Honda Odyssey, Dad in the driver's seat, Mom in the passenger seat, me and the domestic terrorist in the middle row. The engine started, but Dad didn't put it in gear. He just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. His knuckles were white. The silence in the car was heavy, pressurized. It felt like the air before a tornado touches down. You could hear the fan belt squeaking. You could hear Mom sniffling into a tissue. We pulled out of the church lot and onto the main road. The silence stretched for a mile, then 2 miles. I was pressing myself against the window, trying to become invisible. I just wanted to get home, lock my door, and pretend I was adopted. Then Valerie spoke. "I saved them," she said. Her voice was shaky but defiant. Dad's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. If looks could kill, the backseat would have been a crime scene, but he didn't say anything. He just exhaled through his nose, a long, ragged breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "You can be mad at me," Valerie continued, emboldened by the lack of immediate screaming. "But deep down, you know I did the right thing. That grill was an altar of violence, Dad. You were celebrating death. I disrupted the cycle. I liberated those animals from being consumed in a ritual of gluttony." "Valerie, shut up," I whispered. "Read the room." "No, Mason, I won't be silenced," she snapped, turning to me. "You're all brainwashed. Did you see Mrs. Heidi? She cared more about her dress than the suffering of sentient beings. It's performative Christianity. How can you pray to a God of love and then eat a corpse?" "Valerie!" Mom turned around, her face streaked with mascara tears. "You kicked hot coals onto the pastor's wife. You could have burned the house down. This isn't about the cows, Valerie. You humiliated us." "Revolution is always messy, Mom," Valerie shouted back. "History doesn't remember the polite people. It remembers the disruptors." Dad slammed on the brakes. We weren't home yet. We were in the middle of a random suburban street. The minivan lurched to a halt. Dad put the car in park, unbuckled his seatbelt, and turned around in his seat to face her full on. "Disruptor?" Dad's voice was terrifyingly quiet. It was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "You think you're a disruptor? Valerie, you're 23 years old. You live in my basement. You are on my health insurance. You eat food that I pay for. That grill was a 1998 Weber Kettle Master Edition. I spent 3 months sanding the rust off that lid. I ordered the handle from a specialist in Germany." "Material objects don't matter, Dad," Valerie cried, tears finally starting to well up in her eyes, not from guilt, but from the frustration of not being understood. "It's metal. It's replaceable. A life isn't. My reputation isn't replaceable," Dad roared, finally losing the volume control. "Do you have any idea what you just did? I have to see these people at the hardware store. I have to see them at the bank. I can never show my face at the Rotary Club again. I am now the father of the grill kicker. You didn't save any cows, Valerie. Those burgers were already dead. All you did was waste food and assault a clergyman's wife. It was a symbolic act. It was a criminal act," Dad shouted. "If Ricky presses charges, and he should, I am not paying your bail. I mean it, Daisy. I am not paying a dime." Mom started sobbing harder. "Nigel, don't say that." "I mean it." Dad turned back to the road, slamming the car into drive. "She wants to be a revolutionary? Revolutionaries go to prison." I pulled out my phone, trying to distract myself from the family implosion happening 3 feet away from me. I opened the local community Facebook page, the Fielding Community Notice Board. My stomach dropped. It had been 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes. The top post was a video. It was shaky, filmed vertically from someone's phone at the picnic table. The caption read, "Nigel's daughter goes mental at the potluck. Drama, vegan, Jars Karen." I watched it. It was worse on video. The sound the grill made when she kicked it was louder than I remembered. The clang resonated through my phone speakers. You could see the burgers flying. You could clear as day see Mrs. Heidi get slapped by the meat. The comments were already rolling in. "Is that Valerie? I went to high school with her. Always knew she was weird. That's assault. Call the cops. Why is she dressed like a combat boot fairy? Nigel looks heartbroken, OMG. Vegans are officially out of control." "Valerie," I said, my voice deadpan. "You're viral." "What?" She snatched the phone out of my hand. I watched her face as she watched the video. I expected her to be horrified. I expected her to see herself from the outside perspective, a deranged person destroying a nice afternoon. But her expression shifted. Her eyes widened, but not with fear. With excitement. She saw the view count. 450 views in 10 minutes. 50 comments. "They're talking about the message," she muttered, scrolling frantically. "They're calling you a psycho," I corrected her. "Look at the top comment. Someone needs a psych eval. They just don't get it yet, she said, handing the phone back to me. This is good. This is exposure. I can use this. We pulled into the driveway. Dad didn't even wait for the car to stop completely before he jumped out and stormed toward the house. Mom followed him, likely to stop him from throwing Valerie's stuff onto the lawn. Valerie sat in the car for a second longer. She pulled out her own phone. She opened TikTok. She hit the record button. Hey guys, she whispered to the camera, putting on a fake sad face, a single tear perfectly timed. I just got back from the most traumatic experience of my life. My family literally attacked me for standing up for my beliefs. I stared at her. You are actually insane, I said. She ignored me, kept recording, and walked into the house to start the war. This wasn't over. It was just the opening credit sequence. The Carnist defense started exactly 3 seconds after the front door clicked shut, and it was like watching a nuclear reactor melt down in a suburban hallway. Dad didn't even take his shoes off, which is a crime in our house usually, but he marched straight into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, chugged it in one go, and then slammed the glass down on the granite counter so hard I thought it would shatter. Valerie tried to slip past him toward the stairs, phone still in hand, probably trying to get to her ring light before the tears dried up, but Dad wasn't having it. Sit down, Dad barked, pointing a finger at the bar stool. I don't feel safe in this environment right now, Valerie said, her voice trembling with that practiced fragility she learned from watching trauma dump videos on TikTok. Your energy is extremely aggressive, and I need to process my lived experience. Your lived experience? Dad repeated, his face turning a shade of purple I didn't know existed in the human spectrum. Valerie, you just committed arson at a potluck. Sit the hell down. She sat, but she did it with the most dramatic, heavy sigh imaginable, crossing her arms and staring at the wall like a political prisoner. Mom was fluttering around them like a nervous bird, picking up lint from the floor, straightening a placemat, doing anything to avoid looking at the two people about to kill each other. Nigel, maybe we should just let everyone cool off, Mom whispered. Maybe we can talk about this after dinner. There is no dinner, Daisy, Dad yelled, throwing his hands up, because our dinner is currently scattered across the First Baptist lawn gathering ants along with my reputation. He turned back to Valerie, leaning over the island counter. I want to know why, Dad said, his voice dropping to that scary quiet level again. I want to know what went through your brain when you decided to Spartan kick a lit grill. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. Valerie took a deep breath, adjusted her posture, and looked Dad dead in the eye with the cold, dead stare of a cult leader. You're a carnist, Dad, she said, and I couldn't be a bystander to your violence anymore. Dad blinked. A what? A carnist, she repeated, louder this time. You subscribe to the ideology that certain animals exist solely for your pleasure. You're a bloodmouth oppressor, and that grill was a symbol of the patriarchy's dominion over nature. Destroying it was an act of liberation. I was sitting at the kitchen table pretending to look at a flyer for a gutter cleaning service, but I was listening to every word. I had to hand it to her. She had memorized the script perfectly. Bloodmouth? Dad whispered, looking at Mom. Did she just call me a bloodmouth? It's a term, Nigel, Mom said weakly. I think I read about it in a magazine. I don't care what it is, Dad snapped. I care that you destroyed property, Valerie. That Weber was $700. Do you have $700? No. You have a collection of crystals and a part-time job walking dogs that you call Canine Enrichment Consulting. Who is going to pay for the grill? Who is going to pay for Mrs. Heidi's dry cleaning? Money is a social construct used to enforce hierarchy, Valerie sniffed. You're worried about paper currency when millions of beings are being slaughtered. That's your cognitive dissonance showing, Dad. You pet the dog, but you eat the cow. You're living a lie. I am living in a house that I pay for, Dad roared, slamming his hand on the counter. With a mortgage that I pay for. With food that I pay for. And speaking of food, who bought those combat boots you're wearing? Did you buy those with your enrichment money? Or did I buy them for your birthday? That's financial abuse, Valerie shot back instantly. Using gifts as leverage to silence me is classic narcissist behavior. I am not silencing you, Dad shouted. I am asking you to act like a sane human being. You kicked fire onto a woman wearing polyester blend. She could have gone up like a torch. You could be in a cell right now. I would have gone to jail proudly, Valerie said, lifting her chin. Martyrs always face persecution. Gandhi went to jail. Nelson Mandela went to jail. Dad made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Did you just compare yourself to Nelson Mandela because you kicked a hamburger? The struggle is the same, Valerie said seriously. Oppression is oppression. That broke him. Dad just started laughing, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man whose brain had finally snapped under the weight of absurdity. He turned to Mom and pointed at Valerie. "She's done," Dad said, wiping his eyes. "She's done, Daisy. I'm serious. I want her internet cut off, I want her phone on the counter, and she is going to get a real job. At a warehouse or a factory, somewhere where she learns what actual labor is, until she pays me back every cent for that grill and for Mrs. Heidi's dress." Valerie stood up so fast her chair screeched against the floor. "You can't cut off my internet!" she shrieked. "That's my livelihood. I'm a content creator. I have a platform. I have a responsibility to educate." "You have a responsibility to not be a lunatic," Dad yelled back. "I hate you!" Valerie screamed. "I hate this house of murder. I hate your toxic masculinity. I hope you choke on your cholesterol." She spun around and ran for the stairs, her heavy boots thumping against the hardwood like thunder. We heard her door slam upstairs so hard the pictures on the hallway wall actually rattled. Then, silence. Dad slumped onto the bar stool, burying his face in his hands. "What happened?" He mumbled into his palms. "We raised her to be nice. We took her to Disney World. We paid for piano lessons. Where did we go wrong?" Mom walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. "It's just a phase, Nigel. Remember when she went through that goth phase in high school? She'll grow out of it." "She's 23, Daisy," Dad said, his voice hollow. "She's not 15. This isn't a phase. This is brain rot." Upstairs, I heard a muffled voice start speaking. I knew exactly what it was. I pulled out my phone and refreshed TikTok, and there she was, live. She had the ring light on full blast, tears streaming down her face. "Guys," she was sobbing into the camera. "I'm literally shaking right now. My dad just threatened to kick me out because I saved a cow. He's literally screaming at me. I need you guys to send gifts if you support the cause because I might be homeless tonight." A rose emoji popped up on the screen, then a galaxy. Someone had just sent her $20. Unbelievable, I whispered to myself, watching my sister monetize our family trauma in real time. Dad looked up at me, his eyes red and tired. "What is she doing?" "She's live streaming," I said. "She's telling the internet you're kicking her out." Dad stood up. "I'm going to take the router." "Nigel, no," Mom pleaded. "She'll just scream louder." "Let her scream," Dad said, walking toward the living room where the modem lived. "I'm done negotiating with terrorists." He yanked the power cord out of the wall. Upstairs, the muffled voice turned into a high-pitched screech of "No!" Dad stood there holding the cord like a severed snake, looking at me. "Mason," he said, "don't ever get a TikTok." "Don't worry, Dad," I said. "I'm more of a YouTube guy." But I knew this wasn't over. The internet doesn't forget, and Valerie had just declared war. The next morning, the house felt like a bomb site. The air was thick with tension, and the silence was somehow louder than the screaming from the night before. Dad had left for work early, probably to avoid seeing Valerie, or maybe to avoid the shame of showing his face to the neighbors. Mom was in the kitchen aggressively cleaning the grout with a toothbrush, which is her coping mechanism when her life is falling apart. I walked into the kitchen at 8 a.m., grabbing a bowl of cereal, and checked my phone. The notification center was a solid block of red. My heart sank. The video, the one of the Spartan kick, had migrated. It wasn't just on the local Fielding community page anymore. It had hit the public freakout subreddit. It was on Twitter. It was everywhere. 2 million views. 2 million, I whispered, staring at the number. "Mom, look at this." Mom didn't look up from the floor tiles. "I don't want to see it, Mason. I don't want to know." "You have to know," I said. "People are finding Dad's LinkedIn. They're finding the church's Facebook page. Look at the comments." I started reading them out loud because someone had to face reality. "This girl is a legend. Destroy the patriarchy one grill at a time." "Her dad looks like he's about to cry, poor guy." "Wait, is that Nigel from the hardware supply store? I know him." "Boycott that church. Looks like a cult." "Stop it," Mom snapped, finally looking up. Her eyes were bloodshot. "Just stop it, Mason." Just then, the landline rang. Nobody calls the landline. It's exclusively for telemarketers and bad news. Mom stared at it like it was a rattlesnake. She picked it up slowly. "Hello?" I watched her face crumble. "Oh, hello, Elder Davis. Yes, I understand. Yes, we saw the video. Oh, suspended? Indefinitely?" She listened for another minute, nodding silently while tears welled up in her eyes again. "I understand. Yes. We will tell her. Thank you for praying for us." She hung up and sank onto a kitchen chair. "We're suspended," she whispered. "The Board of Elders met last night. They said Valerie's behavior was a violent disruption of fellowship, and we can't come back until she seeks professional counseling and makes a public apology to Mrs. Heidi. So we got kicked out of church? I asked. Great, I can sleep in on Sundays. It's not funny, Mason, Mom cried. This is our community. These are our friends. We've been going there for 20 years. Before I could answer, the sound of heavy boots on the stairs announced the arrival of the celebrity guest. Valerie walked into the kitchen like she owned the place. She was wearing oversized sunglasses inside the house and a t-shirt that said Vegan Vanguard in jagged red font. She didn't look at Mom. She didn't look at me. She walked straight to the fridge, opened it, stared inside for 5 seconds, and then slammed it shut. It smells like genocide in there, she announced to the room. Good morning to you too, I said. Where is the almond milk? She demanded. I know we had a carton. Dad threw it out, I lied. I just wanted to see what she would do. He said it was taking up space for his steaks. Valerie whipped her head toward me. He wouldn't. He's pretty mad, Val, I said, leaning back in my chair. You did get us excommunicated this morning. Excommunicated? She paused, a flicker of interest in her eyes. Wait, actually? Suspended, Mom corrected, wiping her eyes. Elder Davis called. We aren't welcome back until you get help. Valerie pulled her phone out of her pocket, immediately opening TikTok. Oh my God, this is perfect. Perfect, Mom asked, her voice trembling. Valerie, we are social pariahs. Mom, don't you get it? Valerie said, pacing around the kitchen island, holding her phone up to frame her face. The church is an institution of suppression. Them kicking me out proves I'm right. It proves they can't handle the truth. This is part of my origin story. She hit record. Hey guys, update, literally shaking right now. My family's fundamentalist cult just excommunicated me because I dared to speak up for the innocent. They are trying to silence me, but I will not be silenced. Valerie, stop, Mom shouted, standing up. Stop recording lies! Valerie ignored her, spinning around to get good lighting. My own mother is siding with the oppressors, guys. It's so hard being the only awake person in a house of sleepwalkers. Just then, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Dad. Dad. Boss just called me into his office. Someone sent him the video. He's asking if I can control my household. I might be on administrative leave. Do not let her leave the house. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This wasn't just internet drama anymore. This was Dad's job. This was the mortgage. Val, I said, cutting through her monologue. Dad might lose his job. She stopped recording. What? His boss saw the video, I said, holding up the text. People are emailing his work, probably your followers, calling him an animal abuser. Valerie stared at the screen. For a second, I thought I saw a crack in the armor. I thought I saw a flash of guilt. I didn't tell them to do that. You called him a bloodmouth oppressor to 2 million people, I said. What did you think was going to happen? The internet is a mob, Val. You pointed the mob at our dad. She bit her lip, looking down at her combat boots. Well, maybe he should have thought about that before he decided to profit from a system of cruelty. He sells hardware supplies, I shouted. He sells hammers and nails. He's not a butcher. It's all connected, Mason, she snapped, defensive now, retreating back into the ideology because the reality was too scary. Capitalism, carnism, it's all the same beast. If he loses his job, maybe it's a sign from the universe that he needs to align his career with his values. His value is paying for the roof over your head, Mom screamed, startling both of us. Mom never screams. I don't need his money, Valerie yelled back. I have my own income stream now. You have $20 from a stranger on TikTok, I said. I have a community, Valerie corrected, and I'm going to prove it. She stormed out of the kitchen, back toward the front door. I'm going to the library. Since you fascists cut off the Wi-Fi, I have a manifesto to write. She slammed the front door so hard the glass pane shook. Mom sank back into the chair, putting her head on the table. What are we going to do, Mason? What are we actually going to do? I looked at the phone. The video count had ticked up to 2.5 million. I saw a comment from a verified account, a famous vegan activist YouTuber with 5 million subs. Vegan Viking. We need to support this warrior. Who has her contact info? Let's get her a legal fund. I looked at Mom. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. How could it get worse? Mom asked. She's about to get money, I said, and that's the last thing she needs. I was right. By the time Dad got home that night, looking 10 years older and carrying a box of his personal items from his office, Valerie had launched the GoFundMe. Title: Help Valerie fight the carnist cult and legal fees. Goal: $10,000. Raised in 4 hours, won $200. The war had funding now. The hunger strike began on Tuesday, and honestly, it was the most performative thing I have ever witnessed in my 20 years of life, and I once watched a kid in my drama class pretend to be a tree for 45 minutes. Valerie declared that the entire kitchen was a hazardous waste zone because the residual molecules of meat were assaulting her senses. She actually used the word assaulting, like the ham sandwich in the crisper drawer was personally victimizing her. She put blue painter's tape down the middle of the hallway leading to the kitchen, creating a demilitarized zone that nobody was allowed to cross while she was breathing. She spent the first 2 days sitting cross-legged in the living room, draped in a blanket, sipping lemon water and staring at us with the hollow eyes of a Victorian orphan. Every time Dad walked past her to get a coffee, she would let out a weak, trembling cough, just to remind him that he was slowly killing his own daughter with his toxic environment. Dad was taking it about as well as you would expect a man who just got put on administrative leave to take it. He spent most of the day sitting in his recliner in the dark, staring at the blank TV screen, occasionally muttering things like, "I restored that grill for 3 months," and 40 years of work for this. The house felt like a funeral home where the corpse refused to die and kept asking for the Wi-Fi password. By Wednesday afternoon, the GoFundMe had hit $5,000. $5,000. I watched the number climb on my phone while I hid in my room eating a granola bar because I was too scared to use the toaster. People from all over the world were donating. Stay strong, Queen. Don't let the carnage break your spirit. Use this for a hotel room away from those monsters. Valerie wasn't using it for a hotel room, though. She was using it for essential supplies. The first package arrived on Thursday morning. A massive DHL box that required a signature. I opened the door because Mom was currently in the laundry room crying into a basket of towels, which had become her new full-time hobby. I signed for it, dragged it into the hallway, and Valerie appeared at the top of the stairs like a vulture sensing fresh carrion. She hadn't eaten a solid meal in 48 hours, supposedly, but she moved with the speed of an Olympic sprinter. "That is for me," she announced, descending the stairs with her phone already recording. "What is it?" I asked, looking at the shipping label. "It's from Italy." "It's my armor," she said, slicing the tape open with a house key. "My followers need to see me looking strong. I can't lead the revolution in rags, Mason." Dad walked out of the living room, drawn by the sound of ripping cardboard. He looked at the box, then at Valerie. "Is that food?" Dad asked, his voice raspy. "Please tell me you bought food, Valerie. Your mother is worried sick." "I don't need food. I need dignity," Valerie said, pulling out a handbag that probably cost more than my first car. It was black, sleek, with a silver chain strap. She held it up to the light like it was the Holy Grail. "A purse?" Dad asked, blinking slowly. "You bought a purse?" "It is not a purse, Dad," Valerie snapped, clutching it to her chest. "It is a Stella McCartney Falabella. It is made from 100% cruelty-free vegan materials. It represents the future of ethical fashion. It shows the world that you don't need to kill a cow to look fierce." Dad looked at the bag, then at the pile of unpaid bills sitting on the hallway table. "How much was it?" "It doesn't matter," Valerie said, turning to pose for her camera. "It was an investment in my personal brand." "How much, Valerie?" Dad's voice didn't rise. It just got harder, like concrete setting. $1,200, she mumbled, adjusting the strap. The silence that followed could have crushed a diamond. $1,200, Dad repeated. "You raised money for a legal defense fund because you claimed I was kicking you out, and you spent $1,200 on a plastic bag?" "It is not plastic!" Valerie shrieked. "It is mushroom leather, and I am allowed to practice self-care. The stress you have put me under has severely impacted my cortisol levels. Retail therapy is a valid coping mechanism." "I am on administrative leave," Dad shouted, finally snapping. "I might not have a job next week, Valerie, because of you. Because of your video, we might lose the house, and you are buying mushroom bags?" "If you lose the house, it's because of your own karmic debt," Valerie yelled back, clutching the bag like a shield. "Maybe if you stopped vibrating on such a low frequency, the universe would provide for you like it provides for me. I manifested this bag. I manifested this abundance." "You didn't manifest it, you grifted it," I jumped in. I couldn't help it. "You lied to people. You told them you were starving and homeless." "I am starving," she screamed at me. "I haven't eaten in 2 days because this house is a slaughterhouse." "Then eat the quinoa Mom made you," I yelled. "It's in the fridge. It's vegan. It's literally right there." "It's contaminated," she shrieked, tears streaming down her face again, instantly switching on the victim mode. "The air in the fridge circulates. The atoms of the ham touch the atoms of the quinoa. I can't risk it. My body is a temple." Dad just started laughing again, that same broken, wheezing laugh from the other night. He looked at the bag, then at Valerie, Then he just turned around and walked back into the living room. "Dad?" I said, watching him go. He didn't answer. He just sat back down in his recliner and turned the volume up on the fishing show. Valerie sniffed, wiped her eyes, and looked at me with pure venom. "He is so toxic," she whispered. "He is literally trying to gaslight me about physics." She picked up her box and her $1,200 mushroom bag and stomped back upstairs, slamming the door. I stood in the hallway looking at the empty DHL box. I felt sick, not just because of the money, but because she actually believed it. She actually believed she was the victim here. She had rewritten reality in her head so completely that a luxury handbag was a survival necessity. But here is the thing about hunger strikes. Biology doesn't care about your personal brand. Biology doesn't care about your moral superiority. Eventually, the tank runs empty. That night, around 3 a.m., I woke up. I was thirsty, so I crept out of my room to get a glass of water from the bathroom tap because I didn't want to cross the blue tape line in the kitchen and risk waking the dragon. But as I stood in the hallway, I heard something. It was a soft sound, a crinkle, like plastic wrapper being opened very, very slowly. It was coming from the kitchen. I froze, holding my breath. The house was pitch black. I tiptoed toward the top of the stairs and peered down into the darkness. There was a faint light coming from the open fridge door, just a sliver of yellow light slicing across the tile floor. And in that sliver of light, I saw a silhouette. It was Valerie. She was hunched over, practically inside the fridge, and she was eating something. Fast, frantic bites, like a wild animal. I squinted, trying to see what it was. Was it the quinoa? Was she finally breaking the fast with the salad Mom made? Then she turned slightly, and the light caught the package in her hand. It wasn't a Tupperware container. It was a cardboard box with a window, the leftover Pizza Hut box from 3 nights ago. And Valerie, the vegan vanguard, the girl who had Spartan kicked a grill to save the cows, was shoving a cold slice of Meat Lover's Supreme into her mouth. I saw the pepperoni. I saw the ham. I saw the cheese stretching as she tore a bite off. My heart started hammering in my chest. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I knew I had to be steady. This was it. This was the smoking gun. I opened the camera app, switched to video, and hit record. I zoomed in. The digital grain was bad in the low light, but it was clear enough. You could see the combat boots. You could see the vegan vanguard t-shirt. And you could see the undeniable arc of a pepperoni slice entering her mouth. She swallowed, let out a small moan of satisfaction, and reached for another slice. "Got you," I whispered to myself. I had the nuke. Now I just had to figure out when to drop it. I sat on that video for 24 hours, and let me tell you, holding on to a nuclear secret while living in a house under siege is a form of psychological torture I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I felt like a spy behind enemy lines carrying the encrypted codes that could end the war. Friday was agony. Valerie was in peak form. Emboldened by the calories she had secretly consumed in the dead of night, she had more energy, more fire. She spent the morning doing a Get Ready With Me livestream where she styled her new mushroom leather bag with a vintage trench coat she claimed to have thrifted. She didn't. Mom bought it for her at Macy's 2 years ago. She was preaching to her followers about the clarity that comes from fasting. "My mind feels so sharp, you guys," she said into her phone, leaning against the hallway wall. "When you detox your body from violence, you start to vibrate on a higher frequency. I haven't eaten in 3 days, and honestly, I don't even feel hungry. I feel ascended." I was standing right there, holding a laundry basket, watching her lie with a straight face. I could smell the faint scent of pepperoni still lingering in the kitchen trash can where she had buried the crusts. But she looked right through me, her eyes bright with the manic confidence of a sociopath who believes their own press release. Dad was getting worse. He hadn't shaved in 4 days. He was just sitting in the recliner, doom-scrolling on his phone, reading the comments on the local news articles about him. "Local man's daughter exposes family cruelty. Hardware store manager under fire." "They want me to resign," Dad said quietly around noon, not looking away from his screen. The regional manager emailed me. He said the negative publicity is affecting the brand image. He suggested I take an early retirement package. Mom dropped a plate in the sink. It shattered. She didn't even clean it up. She just leaned against the counter and started sobbing again. Soft, hopeless sounds that broke my heart. "See?" Valerie said from the doorway, not even looking up from her phone. "The universe is correcting itself, Dad. This is an opportunity for you to find a job that doesn't align with destruction. You should thank me." Dad looked at her, his eyes dead. "Thank you, Valerie, for ruining my life." "You're welcome," she said, spinning on her heel and walking away. "I'm going to do a Q&A with my subscribers." I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into my room and closed the door. I pulled up the video from last night, the grainy footage of her devouring the meat lover's pizza. I watched it 5 times. I needed to be sure. I needed it to be undeniable. It was, but it wasn't enough. If I just showed Dad, he would yell at her. She would deny it, claim it was a deep fake, or that I staged it. She would gaslight them. She was too good at this game. She had an audience of thousands backing her up, reinforcing her delusion. I needed to break the spell. I needed to destroy her credibility, not just in this house, but in the world she actually cared about. I needed to catch her in 4K. The grainy phone video was good, but I needed cinema quality. I needed undeniable proof that couldn't be dismissed as a moment of weakness. I needed a trap. I waited until she went out for her mindfulness walk around the block, which was really just her walking to the park to get better lighting for her TikToks. The house was quiet. Mom was napping from exhaustion. Dad was still in the chair. I went into the kitchen, the scene of the crime. I knew she would come back. The hunger strike was fake, but the hunger was real. She had tasted the forbidden fruit, or meat, and she would want more, especially since she thought she had gotten away with it. I needed bait, specific bait. I knew Valerie's weakness. Before she woke up 3 weeks ago, her favorite food wasn't just pizza. It was specifically the spicy Italian salami from the deli down on Main Street. The expensive stuff. The kind with the peppercorns embedded in the meat. She used to eat it straight out of the paper wrapping. I grabbed my car keys and drove to the deli. I spent $20 on half a pound of the premium spicy salami. The smell alone filled my car. It was pungent, rich, undeniable. I drove back home, sneaking in through the garage so she wouldn't see me. I went into the kitchen and cleared a space on the bottom shelf of the fridge, right in the front. I unwrapped the butcher paper slightly, just enough so the smell would hit you the second you opened the door, but not enough to dry out the meat. Then, I set the trap. I took my old GoPro, the one I used for mountain biking, and I wedged it on top of the fridge, tucked behind a box of cereal and a decorative plant Mom kept up there. I angled it perfectly downward, facing the open space in front of the refrigerator door. I tested the angle with my phone app. It was perfect. A wide-angle shot of the entire kitchen floor and the fridge interior. Anyone opening that door would be lit up like a stage actor. I set it to motion detect mode. Silent recording. 4K resolution. 60 frames per second. Now, I just had to wait. Valerie came home an hour later, looking flushed and happy. "I just hit 10,000 followers," she announced, throwing her keys on the table. "I'm an influencer now, officially." "That's great, Val," I said, sitting at the table doing my homework, trying to keep my voice steady. "Really happy for you." "I'm going to do a big live stream tonight," she said, pouring herself a glass of water. "A truth-telling session. I'm going to expose everything. I'm going to tell them about how Dad forced me to eat meat as a child. How it was a form of grooming." My pencil snapped in my hand. "Grooming?" I asked. "Val, he gave you chicken nuggets." "It's the same psychological mechanism, Mason," she snapped. "Normalizing violence to desensitize the child, it's systematic abuse, and I'm going to blow the whistle." She took a sip of water and then, she paused. Her nose twitched. She smelled it, the salami. I saw her eyes flick toward the fridge, just for a microsecond. A primal, involuntary reaction. Then she looked back at me, masking it instantly. "I'm going to go meditate before the stream," she said. "Don't disturb me." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. She went upstairs, but I knew she wouldn't stay there. The seed was planted, the smell was in the air, and now that she knew nobody was watching, the urge would be overwhelming. I waited until 2 a.m. again. I lay in my bed, staring at the GoPro app on my phone, watching the live feed of the dark kitchen. Nothing happened for 2 hours. I was starting to doze off, thinking maybe she had more willpower than I gave her credit for. Then, at 2:42 a.m., movement. The kitchen door creaked open. Valerie entered the frame. She wasn't wearing her combat boots this time. She was barefoot, moving silently across the tiles. She was wearing her vegan Vanguard shirt as pajamas. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She stopped in the middle of the room, listening. She looked toward the hallway, then toward the living room, checking the perimeter. Coast clear. She walked to the fridge and opened it. The light flooded the room, illuminating her face, and the expression on her face wasn't one of disgust. It was pure, unadulterated lust. She reached in, bypassing the almond milk, bypassing the leftover salad. Her hand went straight for the butcher paper. She pulled it out, unwrapped it right there in the open fridge door light, looking like a raccoon discovering a trash can full of gold. She took a slice of salami, held it up to her nose, inhaled deeply, and then shoved the entire thing into her mouth. She closed her eyes, chewing slowly, savoring it. A look of ecstasy on her face that she had never shown for a kale salad. She ate another slice, then another, then a handful. She was double-fisting premium Italian salami while wearing a shirt that condemned meat eating, captured in 4K resolution from a high angle. I watched on my phone screen, heart pounding. "Got you," I whispered. "Got you, you absolute fraud." She ate about half the bag, wrapped it back up, shoved it to the back of the fridge behind the pickles, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and closed the door, plunging the room back into darkness. I stopped the recording, saved the file, backed it up to the cloud, and then emailed it to myself. I had the weapon. Now I just needed the battlefield. The next morning, Saturday, was the day of her big live stream. She had been hyping it up all week. The exposé. My truth. She had promised her 10,000 followers a bombshell revelation about our family. "I'm going live at 6 p.m., she told us at breakfast, looking smug. "I suggest you all stay in your rooms so you don't embarrass yourselves." "I'll be watching," I said, sipping my coffee. "Good," she said. "Maybe you'll learn something." I walked into the living room where the big 65-inch Samsung Smart TV was mounted on the wall. I checked the inputs, checked the AirPlay connection, checked the volume. Everything was ready. I went to my room and opened my laptop. I loaded the GoPro footage into my editing software. I didn't add music, I didn't add effects. I just brightened the exposure slightly so you could clearly see the vegan Vanguard logo on her shirt while she chewed the pig. I exported the file, ValerieExposed.mp4. 6 p.m. rolled around. Valerie set up her ring light in the dining room, using the nice wallpaper as a backdrop. She had her phone on a tripod. She had put on makeup. She looked tragic and brave. "Hey guys," she started, her voice soft and breathy. "Thank you so much for tuning in. The energy in the chat is so beautiful right now." I was in the living room with Dad and Mom. "Dad," I said, "come watch this." "I don't want to watch her lies, Mason," Dad grumbled. "Trust me," I said, holding the remote. "You want to watch this." I turned the TV on. I navigated to the YouTube app. I found her channel. She was streaming to both TikTok and YouTube, and I cast it to the big screen. There she was, 10 feet tall in our living room, lying to the world. "My father," she was saying, wiping a fake tear. "He used to force-feed me steak. He would lock me in the kitchen until I finished it. It was torture." Dad sat up. "That is a lie. I never did that." "Shh," I said. "Wait for it." "And that's why," Valerie continued, "I can never go back. I can never let the violence of meat touch my lips again. It's a spiritual poison, and I am pure now. I am 100% plant-based, and I have never felt cleaner." I looked at the time. She had 3,000 live viewers. "Okay," I whispered. I opened the AirPlay menu on my phone. I selected Living Room TV. I selected Valerie Exposed on MP4. "Dad," I said, "watch the TV." "What?" Dad asked. And then the live stream on the TV cut out, replaced instantly by the high-definition footage of our kitchen at 2:42 a.m. Dad stared at the 65-inch screen like he was watching the moon landing. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes were unblinking, and for a solid 10 seconds, the only sound in the living room was the amplified high-definition audio of my sister chewing on cured pork. On the screen, 2:42 a.m., Valerie peeled another slice of spicy salami. Her eyes rolled back in her head in pure carnivorous ecstasy, and the timestamp in the corner glowed like a neon sign of truth. "Is that," Mom whispered, clutching her chest, "is that the spicy pepperoni from Antonio's Deli?" "It is," I said, pausing the video right as Valerie shoved a handful of meat into her mouth. "It's the premium stuff, Dad. $28 a pound." Dad stood up slowly. But it wasn't the angry, red-faced Dad from Tuesday. It was a different man entirely. The tension drained out of his shoulders, the lines on his forehead smoothed out. A strange, calm smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who just found out he isn't crazy. He looked like a prisoner who just heard the warden died. "She's eating it," Dad whispered. "She's eating the meat." "She ate half the bag," I confirmed. In the other room, through the open archway, we could still hear Valerie's voice, high and breathy, continuing her monologue to her 3,000 viewers. "And that's why I feel so light," Valerie was saying, unaware that her execution warrant was currently paused on the living room TV. "Because I've released the heavy energy of death from my system. I am running on pure solar power and compassion right now." Dad laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Solar power." He shook his head. "She's running on Antonio's pepperoni." He turned toward the dining room. "I'm going in there." "Wait," I said, jumping up and blocking his path. "Dad, stop. If you go in there now and just yell at her, she'll mute the stream. She'll spin it. She'll tell them you're abusing her again. She'll cry and they'll send her more money." Dad stopped. So what do? We have the proof. We don't just show her, I said, pulling out my phone. We show them. I looked at the TV screen where I had the video paused. I'm going to upload this to Twitter right now, and I'm going to tag her handle, and I'm going to use her hashtags. Vegan Vanguard, is my truth, Spartan kick. Then what? Mom asked, looking terrified but also a little bit excited. Then, I said, grinning. We watched the chat. I hit upload. The file was large, but our fiber internet was fast. The progress bar zipped across the screen. Upload complete. I drafted the tweet. The truth about the grill kicker, caught in 4K last night. By fraud by your meat lover. I hit send. Then I opened her live stream on my phone again. I logged into my burner account and I pasted the link into her chat. User 123. Hey guys, check this link, she is lying. User 123. She ate salami last night, video proof. I spammed it 3 times before her mods could block me, but it was too late. The internet moves faster than light. I saw the comments start to shift. In the dining room, Valerie was still talking. I think my next step is to write a book about my journey. But then, she stopped. She leaned closer to her phone screen, squinting. Why are you guys spamming a link? She asked, confused. Don't click suspicious links, guys. It's probably a virus from the haters. But the chat was scrolling faster now, a waterfall of text. Wait, is that real? OMG, I just watched it. She is eating pepperoni. Lamau the timestamp. Fraud. Scammer. Give me my money back. Valerie's face changed. The serene guru mask slipped, replaced by genuine confusion. What are you talking about? What video? Now, I whispered to Dad. Now we go in. I grabbed the remote. I turned the volume on the TV up to maximum, level 100, shaking the walls. I hit play. The sound of amplified chewing blasted through the house. Smack, crunch, gulp. It sounded like a dinosaur eating a car. Valerie froze in the dining room. Her eyes went wide. Dad and I walked into the archway, entering the frame of her livestream background. Valerie spun around. What is that? Turn that off. I'm live! We know you're live, sweetie, Dad said, his voice booming. He didn't look angry. He looked triumphant. He walked right up to the edge of her ring light's glow. Dad, get out! She shrieked, trying to block the camera with her body. Guys, I'm so sorry. My dad is being abusive again. He's playing loud noises to disorient me. It's not noise, Valerie, I said, holding up my phone so her camera could see it. It's ASMR. I pointed to the living room TV, visible through the archway behind her. On the massive screen, giant-sized Valerie was currently unhinging her jaw to inhale a slice of salami. Valerie turned around. She saw the TV. She saw herself. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from the TV to Dad, to her phone, where the chat was now essentially a wall of vomit emojis and clown faces. That's, she stammered. That's deep fake. That's AI. She turned back to the camera, desperation in her eyes. Guys, that is AI generated. My brother works in tech. He generated that. Look at the fingers. Look at the lighting. It's not real. It's not AI, Val, Dad said, stepping into the frame. I checked the fridge. The Antonio's spicy salami I bought yesterday? It's gone. Half the bag is gone. You planted it! She screamed, her voice cracking. You drugged me. You put meat in my mouth while I was sleeping. While you were standing up? I asked, laughing. You walked to the fridge, Val. Look at the footage. You selected it. You sniffed it. You enjoyed it. I was sleepwalking, she yelled, pivoting to a new lie instantly. It was a trauma response. My body was in starvation mode because of your toxicity, and I entered a fugue state. Chat update. Vegan Viking, unsubbed. This is pathetic. Earth Warrior. I donated $50 for this. Refund. Troll King. The Crunch Noise, LMAO. Salami Girl. New nickname unlocked. Valerie looked at the viewer count. It was dropping. 2,800 to 500, 2,000. People weren't just leaving, they were reporting the stream for scams and fraud. Stop it! She screamed at the phone, picking it up and shaking it. Stop leaving. Listen to me. They are gaslighting you. This is a setup. The only thing set up, Dad said, leaning in close to the microphone, was the grill you kicked over. Dad, stop! She wailed. No, I'm done stopping, Dad said, looking directly into the lens of her iPhone, addressing the 2,000 people still watching. Hello, Internet. I am Nigel, the Bloodmouth. And I just want to say, if you donated money to my daughter because you thought she was homeless or starving, you were scammed. She lives in a 4-bedroom house, she has a heater in her room, and last night she ate about $12 worth of premium cured pork. Have a nice evening. He reached out and tapped the screen. Stream ended. Valerie stood there, holding the black screen of her phone, staring at her reflection. The silence in the dining room was deafening. The only sound was the loop on the TV in the other room. Chew. Swallow, chew, swallow. She looked up at us, her eyes wild, trapped. She had lost the narrative, she had lost the crowd, and she was standing in a dining room smelling faintly of the very meat she swore to destroy. "You ruined my career," she whispered, her voice trembling with genuine hatred. "You don't have a career, Valerie," Dad said, crossing his arms. "You have a viral video and a stomach full of ham, and now we need to talk about rent." "I hate you," she hissed. "I hate you all." "I know," Dad said, "but you're going to hate the job application process even more." She threw her phone onto the couch. It bounced harmlessly, and she collapsed onto the floor, burying her face in her hands. Not a performance this time, just the crushing weight of reality coming down on her like a falling piano. "Mason," Dad said, turning to me, "turn off the TV. I think we've seen enough." I clicked the remote. The chewing stopped. But the war wasn't over, because a narcissist never accepts defeat. They just changed the battlefield, and Valerie was already thinking of her next move. The silence in the dining room after the live stream cut off was heavy enough to crush a submarine. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was the vacuum of space left after a star explodes. Valerie was still on the floor, curled into a ball of vintage trench coat and shame, but she wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the floorboards with a look of pure calculation. I could practically hear the gears in her head grinding, trying to find a way to spin this, trying to find an angle where eating half a pound of cured pork was actually a brave act of resistance against the patriarchy. Dad didn't give her the chance. "Get up," Dad said, his voice flat, devoid of any sympathy. "Get off the floor, Valerie. The performance is over." She didn't move. She just whispered into the carpet. "You humiliated me. You violated my safe space." "You violated my fridge," Dad countered. "And you defrauded 3,000 people. Do you know what wire fraud is? Because you just committed it on a live stream." That word, fraud, finally got a reaction. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide and panic-stricken. "It wasn't fraud!" she hissed, scrambling to her feet. "It was a donation. They donated to my energy, to my survival. They donated because you said you were starving." I cut in, looking at my phone where the Twitter notifications were now scrolling so fast they were a blur. "And then they watched you unhinge your jaw like a python and swallow a pepperoni log. Check Twitter, Val. You're trending." She snatched her phone off the couch, her fingers flying across the screen. I watched her face as she read the hashtags. Salami Girl was number 3 in the country. Vegan Fraud was number 5. The memes were already being born. Photoshopped images of her face on the Hamburglar, remixes of her chewing sound turned into a techno beat, side-by-side comparisons of her preaching about toxins while holding the meat. "They're mocking me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're tearing me apart." "They're holding you accountable," Dad said. "Welcome to the real world. Actions have consequences." "This is cyberbullying," she screamed, throwing her phone onto the cushion. "I'm the victim here. I had a moment of weakness. I was protein deficient because of your toxic household." "Valerie," Mom said, speaking up for the first time. She was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, looking older than I had ever seen her. "Stop it. Just stop." Valerie looked at Mom, expecting the usual ally, expecting the soft landing. "Mom?" Valerie whimpered, putting on the baby voice. "Mom, they're being so mean to me." "You lied to us," Mom said, her voice shaking. "You told me the smell of my cooking made you sick. I ate salad for 3 days, Valerie. I ate lettuce in the garage so I wouldn't offend you. And you were coming down here at 2 a.m. to have a picnic?" "It wasn't a picnic," Valerie yelled. "It was a binge. It's an eating disorder triggered by trauma. You should be comforting me." "I'm done comforting you," Mom whispered. And that was the moment I knew it was truly over, when Daisy, the woman who apologizes to furniture when she bumps into it, finally ran out of patience. Mom turned around and walked out of the room. "I'm going to bed. Nigel, handle it." Dad looked at Valerie. "You heard your mother," Dad said. "Go to your room. Pack your things." "Pack?" Valerie froze. "You can't kick me out. I have tenant rights. I have established residency." "I'm not kicking you out tonight," Dad said, checking his watch, "because I'm not a monster. You can sleep here tonight, but tomorrow morning, things change. Tomorrow morning the internet goes off, the car keys go on my dresser, and you start applying for jobs. Real jobs, Valerie. Starbucks, Walmart, the warehouse, I don't care. But if you are living under this roof, you are paying rent, starting immediately. I can't work a normal job, Valerie shrieked. I'm a public figure. I'll be recognized. People will harass me. You're not a public figure, Dad said, walking toward the kitchen to finally get a beer. You're a meme. There's a difference. Good night. He left us alone in the dining room. Valerie looked at me, eyes wild, seeking an alliance. Mason, she whispered, you have to help me edit a response video. We can fix this. We can say the video was deep-faked. We can say Dad hired an actor. Val, I said, picking up the tripod she had left standing. I filmed the video. She stared at me, the betrayal finally registering. You? She breathed. I put the GoPro on the fridge, I said. I couldn't watch you grift Mom anymore. She looked at me with pure hatred, a cold reptilian stare. You're dead to me, she hissed. Yeah, well, I said, walking out. At least I'm not hungry. I went to my room, but I didn't sleep. I spent the night watching the digital empire of the vegan vanguard crumble in real time. It was brutal. The vegan Viking, the big YouTuber who had supported her initially, posted a response video at 4 a.m. titled, I was wrong about Salami Girl. In the video, he dissected her lies. He showed the timestamps. He called her a disgrace to the movement. He encouraged everyone to request refunds, and that was the final nail in the coffin. The refunds. I woke up the next morning Sunday to the sound of screaming. Not performative screaming, not for the camera screaming, actual guttural screaming. I ran into the hallway. Dad was already there in his bathrobe. Valerie's door was open. She was sitting on her bed, staring at her laptop screen, pulling her hair out. It's gone, she screamed. It's all gone. What's gone? Dad asked. The money, she wailed, turning the laptop around to show us. It was an email from GoFundMe. Subject, urgent, campaign suspended and funds frozen. Dear Valerie, due to multiple reports of fraudulent activity and a violation of our terms of service regarding misrepresentation of circumstances, your campaign has been suspended. All donations have been automatically refunded to the donors. Your account has been flagged for review. The $5,000, the escape fund, the Stella McCartney bag money, vanished. They took it back, she sobbed, rocking back and forth. That was my money. I earned that money. You didn't earn it, Dad said, leaning against the doorframe. You stole it, and now you're lucky they aren't calling the police. How am I supposed to pay you rent now? She screamed at him. You set me up to fail. You want me to be destitute. I want you to be responsible, Dad said. I'm leaving, she announced, jumping off the bed. I'm leaving this toxic hellhole. I'm going to stay with Daniel. Daniel was her ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago, a guy who lived in a van and sold wire-wrapped crystals at festivals. Daniel blocks your number every time you call him, I pointed out helpfully. He'll understand, she shouted, grabbing a duffel bag from her closet. He understands persecution. She started throwing clothes into the bag. Random things. A silk scarf, a single combat boot, her ring light. I'm going to document this, she yelled, grabbing her phone. I'm going to live stream my exile. She held up her phone, hit the button for TikTok, and prepared her sad face. But then she stopped. She stared at the screen. Account banned, she whispered. She swiped to YouTube. Account suspended for terms of service violation, scams and deceptive practices. She swiped to Instagram. Account restricted. She stood there, holding the phone, surrounded by a pile of half-packed clothes, in a room paid for by her father, wearing pajamas paid for by her mother. The digital world had finally walled her off. She had no audience. She had no money. She had no platform. She was just Valerie again. She looked at Dad, lip trembling, the fight finally draining out of her, replaced by the terrified realization of a 23-year-old who has absolutely no life skills. Dad, she whispered, voice small. My accounts are gone. Good, Dad said. But who am I without them? She asked, and it was the most honest question she had asked in years. Dad looked at her, and for a second, I saw the anger fade, replaced by just pity. You're my daughter, Dad said. And you're unemployed. Breakfast is in 10 minutes. Eat whatever you want. But after that, we are going to look at the classifieds in the paper. She dropped the phone on the bed. She didn't pack the bag. She just sat down on the floor and cried. Quiet, real tears this time. But I knew Valerie. I knew the narcissist cycle. This was the collapse phase, but the revenge phase was still a possibility. I wasn't letting my guard down yet. I'm going to make eggs, Dad said, walking away. Real eggs. I stayed in the doorway for a second. "Val," I said. She looked up at me, eyes red. "The internet isn't real," I said. "But the rent is." She didn't answer. She just reached for her mushroom leather bag, clutched it to her chest like a teddy bear, and stared at the blank wall where her followers used to be. The war was over, but the cleanup was just beginning. It has been 60 days since the Spartan kick heard around the world, and the silence in our house is honestly the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. It's not the tense silence of a bomb waiting to go off anymore. It's the exhausted silence of a battlefield after the treaty has been signed. Valerie is currently sitting at the kitchen table, wearing a high-visibility vest and steel-toed boots that are actually for work, not for fashion. She is eating a bowl of oatmeal with a level of aggression that suggests she is imagining the spoon is my neck. She works at the Amazon fulfillment center now, the night shift, packing boxes for 12 hours a day. Dad didn't just make her get a job, he made her get a job where she isn't allowed to have her phone on the floor. "How is the shift?" Dad asks, turning a page of the newspaper. He is back at work too. The administrative leave ended once the internet mob moved on to the next villain of the week, a lady who yelled at a barista in Ohio, and his boss decided that Nigel wasn't a PR risk anymore. "My feet are bleeding," Valerie mutters, staring into her oats. "And my manager is a fascist who timed my bathroom break." "Welcome to the proletariat," I say from the fridge, grabbing a juice box. She shoots me a look that could curdle milk, but she doesn't say anything. She doesn't have the energy. The internet detox has changed her. She looks healthier, honestly. Her skin isn't gray anymore, probably because she is eating whatever Mom cooks, including the meatloaf, although she still insists on calling it protein loaf to maintain a shred of dignity. But the real closure, the final act of this insane opera, happened last Sunday. We were finally allowed back to church. The suspension was lifted, on the condition that Valerie make a formal in-person apology to the congregation, and specifically to Mrs. Heidi and her white dress. I was terrified. I thought Valerie would pull a stunt. I thought she would smuggle in a megaphone or wear a shirt with a slogan on it. But when Sunday morning came, she walked down the stairs wearing a modest blue dress. No combat boots, no sunglasses. She looked defeated. The drive to the church was quiet. Dad parked the minivan in the same spot we had fled from 2 months ago. We walked up the steps, heads down, like a family of convicts returning to the scene of the crime. The sanctuary was full. Pastor Ricky was up at the pulpit, but he stopped speaking when we walked in. 300 heads turned. The whispers started instantly. "That's her," I heard Mrs. Henderson whisper. "That's the karate girl." Valerie froze in the aisle. Her face went pale. For a second, I thought she was going to run. I thought the fight-or-flight instinct was going to kick in and she would bolt for the parking lot. But Dad put a hand on her back, gentle but firm. "Walk," Dad whispered. She walked, stiff-legged, eyes fixed on the floor, until we reached the front row. Mrs. Heidi was there, sitting in the piano bench. She wasn't wearing white this time. She was wearing a very safe, stain-resistant floral pattern. Valerie stood in front of her. The church went dead silent. You could hear the dust motes floating in the light beams. "Mrs. Heidi," Valerie said. Her voice was so quiet I barely heard it. "I want to apologize for my actions." Mrs. Heidi looked at her, face stern, waiting. "I was unwell," Valerie continued, reciting the script Dad had made her practice for 3 nights. "And I projected my internal struggles onto your property and your lunch. It was disrespectful and unchristian, and I am sorry." She reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for the dry cleaning," Valerie said, her hand shaking. "It's from my first paycheck." Mrs. Heidi looked at the envelope, then at Valerie, then at Dad. She took it. "Thank you, Valerie," Mrs. Heidi said, her voice cool. "We forgive you, but maybe you should sit in the back row today." "Yes, ma'am," Valerie whispered. We sat in the back. The service continued, nobody got kicked, nobody screamed, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I needed to record everything for evidence. But the true ending didn't happen in the church. It happened in the backyard, yesterday afternoon. Dad called a family meeting on the patio. It was warm, a perfect New Zealand summer evening. The cicadas were singing. Dad was standing by the empty spot on the patio pavers. The scorch mark where the old Weber kettle used to sit was still visible, a black scar on the concrete reminding us of the incident. "I have an announcement," Dad said, clasping his hands behind his back. Valerie was sitting on the lawn chair, scrolling on a new phone, a flip phone Dad bought her, no apps, just calls and texts. She looked up, bored. "What is it, Dad?" she asked. "Did you get a promotion?" "Better," Dad said. He nodded to me. I walked to the garage and wheeled it out. The beast. A brand new, top-of-the-line stainless steel gas grill. 6 burners, infrared sear station, built-in thermometer. It gleamed in the sunset like a spaceship. Dad looked at it with pure love. I decided to upgrade. Charcoal is traditional, but gas is reliable. Less mess, less kickable. He looked at Valerie. I'm firing it up tonight, Dad said. Steaks, T-bones, thick ones. He paused, waiting for the reaction. Waiting for the meat is murder speech. Waiting for the lecture on methane. Waiting for the drama. Valerie looked at the grill, then at Dad. She sighed, a long, tired sigh of a woman who spends her nights lifting boxes for $15 an hour. Medium rare, she said. Dad blinked. What? Cook mine medium rare, Valerie said, looking back down at her flip phone. And don't burn the fat. I hate it when the fat gets charred. Dad looked at Mom. Mom looked at me. I smiled. You got it, Dad said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. Medium rare coming up. He fired up the burners. The whoosh of the gas igniting was the sound of victory. I sat there watching them. The smoke started to rise, the smell of searing meat filled the air, and my sister, the former vegan vanguard, the revolutionary, the Spartan kicker, sat there waiting for her steak. I realized then that the internet isn't real life. On the internet, you can be a warrior, a saint, a victim, or a star. You can curate your reality until you believe your own lies. But out here, in the backyard, hunger is real, rent is real, and eventually everyone has to eat. I pulled out my smartphone. I opened the camera app. I framed the shot. Dad at the grill, Valerie in the chair, the smoke rising into the blue sky. I hovered my thumb over the record button, thinking about the caption, thinking about the views, thinking about the reunion episode. Then, I lowered the phone. I locked the screen and put it in my pocket. Hey, Dad, I said, standing up. Do you need help with the tongs? Yeah, Mason, Dad said, smiling. Come over here. Let me teach you how to not ruin a good piece of meat. We cooked in silence, and it was perfect.